In this crazy world, we have a lot of questions. This show will help find those answers. Top Secret News is a show dedicated to bringing topics such as UFOs, abductions, implants, Men in Black, Area 51 underground bases, disclosure, weather manipulation, cryptozoology topics, and so much more. Host Christina George is no stranger to the airwaves and will be your host. Now, your host of Top Secret News, Christina George.
Welcome back, everybody, to Top Secret News Radio Show. I am so excited tonight to be with you guys. Recently, I put out a post asking what kind of topics, since I brought the show back, what kind of topics did you want me to cover? Did you have specific guests? All different things. So since we covered just a little bit of everything on this show, and an overwhelming response that I was getting in private messages and emails was people wanting to know if I could get a guest that would be able to discuss our national parks and forests and all of the missing people that go there. I've been saying for years that it is not safe to go camping out in those locations. So many other things. So as soon as everybody put that out, I knew exactly who I needed to contact. So tonight, my guest is Chris George, my brother from another mother. And he has actually been a park ranger for, I think, over 45 years. He's also in paranormal. He has his own paranormal group. It's called APRO, and that is the Anubis Paranormal Resource Organization. And there he investigates everything. A lot like my group here in Sacramento. We have different divisions, so we cover everything. He has so much information. I think tonight is going to be a great show. If you guys have questions, and I know you always do, make sure to put them down in the comment section. All right. Look forward to the show, and let's go. Hello, my brother. How are you?
I am doing very well, sis. Good to be on your show.
I am so glad you're on. We've been trying to get you on for so long, and I was going to bring you on Paranormal Connections, which I still am, because,
good.
Again, you and I could talk about all these different topics, and there's plenty of conversation that we could have about all this stuff. So I am super looking forward to it. Since you have a vast background, I'm going to kind of let you give everybody an idea of what your background is and, kind of where we're going with this topic tonight, because you'll be that foremost person that with a lot of experience, I think, to answer some of these questions.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, the paranormal and being a ranger have kind of gone hand in hand with me ever since I was a very young individual. I had encounters with ghosts, with UFOs, with possible alien abductions, Bigfoot cryptids, and so forth. But in the back of my mind, I was about 7, 8 years old at the time when all of this started happening. But at the same time, I was living in a small town called Leadville, Colorado, which is basically the highest incorporated city in the world. It sits at 10,410 feet. And one of the main things that people do is they go out and recreate. This one particular time, my family and I went camping, and we decided to go to a campfire talk presented by a ranger. Now, at that time, I didn't have any clue as to what a ranger was, but I remember most distinctly that evening, and it was dark. It was just getting dark, a little bit of twilight, and all of a sudden, the fire was roaring, and behind me, or behind the fire, I should say, was this man headed towards our direction, and all you could see was the outline, and the outline of him had the traditional smoky hat. And so he got to the front of the of all the audience, and he started talking about the ancient Indian legends and the stars. And I was completely mesmerized from that point on. And I knew that that was what I wanted to be when I grew up. And about at the age of 10, I went to California with my folks and lived in Southern California and participated in all the things I knew still. So I took all my classes that were geared towards that. I'd visit every park I could, and eventually graduated. Went to Long Beach State University and also UCLA. I went to UCLA, ironically, for my paranormal studies. But at UC Long Beach, I studied recreation, outdoor science, and law enforcement. And so I got started at a regional park there, and I just worked my way up. And from working basically from the gates all the way up to being a chief park ranger. And during that time, I visited many state parks, national parks, and other parks, and encountered quite a few very odd things, a lot of things that were to be kept secret, a lot of things that sounds like something right out of the Twilight Zone or the Predator movies. And I was thrown right into it. And as a result, I was literally called, or nicknamed, I should say, Ranger Mulder after the X Files. Because when anything strange was happening, who did they call? They would call me. And I would meet with the local rangers at any given park, and we would do the investigations. And most of those investigations left me scratching my head more than giving me the answer. And to this day, like I said, I'm still very active with the National Park Service, not so much physically, but with with telecommunications and so forth. I'm able to help out as much as I can.
Well, let's start out with this because this is the number one question I have gotten over the years. And again, I am no person that knows everything about the national parks other than I usually stay away from them. But the biggest question is, are the national forests and parks, do you feel that they are safe for people to be out roaming around in?
No, absolutely not. Unless you stay to the well uh, congregated areas. Say, for instance, Yosemite. Yosemite Valley, hardly anything happens, but you go into the back countries and people become lost. Um, they encounter things. I personally can speak to that. UFO sightings, possible abductions, cryptids, and so forth. I would never, ever recommend anyone to go into those areas alone. You're just inviting danger. And it's it's one of those things you just are by the luck of the draw. And a seasoned hiker for many, 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 many years who knows the park forwards, backwards, left, and right can disappear in an instant and never be found.
Yeah.
Or yeah, go
Oh,
ahead.
go ahead. Well, no, I was just going to say, I personally know like three separate people. One
Mhm.
went out on a hike. One went to go camping to go do a Bigfoot investigation, which is kind of after that one, that's kind of when I stopped going out, like out in the middle of nowhere, like I used to love to do. And a third one just went out with the family, ended up going to go get
Yeah,
some water or something and never
yeah,
came back. And,
exactly.
when you hear about it on the news and you don't really hear about it anymore, it's just kind of hit and miss. But when a family member goes missing, all of a sudden, you'll hear about it for a minute and they'll always say, oh, they probably just were walking and tripped and fell and hit their head or fell down a ravine. And again, granted, all of those things can happen. But in a situation like that, you would normally find the body at some point. And these people went missing with no trace. no evidence of the bodies, nothing.
Right.
It's just crazy.
Well, a lot of times when you do have the news services involved,
Right.
it's to do damage control, and they release very, very little information, primarily because they do not want attendance to be affected. And they also do not want it known that there are dangers out there that you are not prepared for. And I mean, personally speaking, whenever we would have a quote unquote questionable uh, experience or disappearance take place, we would always follow a protocol. And that was the investigating ranger or rangers would write up reports. Now, this is normal on a day to day occurrence. I mean, you would write up a report for basically too large of a fire or a dog off a leash. But when it came to these reports, they would always go to the supervising district ranger. They, in turn, would put it in a special envelope. Then that would be locked away in a cabinet. And a few days later, if not that same day, uh, usually two men in suits would show up at the park and take that report. And if you tried to do a follow up on it, there would be no history of that report.
Which is
So,
very common, like when we're talking about how when people have reported, landings or things like that, and all of a sudden, it just disappears, and all of the information or anything that may have been, nobody can find it. It's nowhere to be found. I literally just had a Gary Hasseltine on, a police officer from the UK, and he covered the Rendlesham Forest incident, which
okay,
was the UK's Roswell.
right,
And
right,
it was the same thing, and crazy enough, it happened in the forest
yeah, exactly.
where there's not a lot of people there that are going to be able to see it, but they happen to stumble across this thing. So
Hmm.
have you personally in the forest, have you come across anything of a sighting or people claiming that they've had sightings or been abducted and came back?
Oh, more so than I could even begin to count. There was always reports of UF, UFO activity. In fact, one time, I mean, I could give you stories for days, uh, but the biggest ones were we had a report, and this was again at Yosemite. Now, Yosemite is a hotbed for
Yeah.
activity, and they believe it's because of the granite and the silica and some of the sandstone that is there that draws this. Uh, but we had reports of UFO being sighted in Tuolumne Meadows. And so I and another ranger went back to investigate, and we were met with the Army, and they would not let us go past a certain point. Now, this was in the national park. We have full
In your
jurisdiction in our
area,
parks.
right?
Yeah. And they would not allow us to cross. And so there was a lot of military activity going on. Nobody would say anything or explain anything. And I got into a huge argument with one of the officers there and literally claiming, hey, you're on our jurisdiction right now. We deserve the right to know what is happening if it is endangering the populace.
Right.
And they completely refused. And we were literally backed off with soldiers with their rifles aimed at us. Now, technically, yeah, we could have returned, with our weapons, but we were just carrying rifles on our backpacks, and then, of course, our sidearms, which were 9 millimeters. We were outgunned 10-1. So
Right.
we backed off, and I reported it to our supervisors, and they said, "Don't worry about it. It never happened." And I said, "What do you mean it never happened? I was right there." They said, "That's just to forget it." So there again, it shows you that there is more than going activity going on than you would literally know. One time I watched a UFO. It was dusk, and it was going into the mountains again in Yosemite, and it literally went right into a mountainside. And I just sat there with my eyes open going, what the heck?
I've heard of that happening. I've heard of that happening.
Yeah,
Up in the mountains in the Carolinas somewhere. I had a
yeah.
guest on a long time ago, and she's been following this and had a little blog for years and years and years talking about this. And everybody's, oh, can't be until that she started
Hmm.
actually getting video. And the same thing, there's a lot of military presence during those times, and they don't want anybody trying to be able to get anything.
Yeah.
My question, I guess, for you, Chris, is that, okay, with your own experience and your involvement in the paranormal and everything, how hard was it to, I mean, I guess in partly because since you're kind of like the park Molnar,
Hmm.
on the other hand, would it be so frustrating to see what's transpiring and really nobody being able to talk about it? I mean, did they tell you guys all the time, like, do not discuss this stuff, this is work stuff? It just like the military, right? Like,
Very much so, because you do sign a confidentiality clause about certain things. And I
right.
always kind of scratched my head when I first started working in the park system. And it was like, why am I signing a confidentiality clause? It's a park, isn't it?
Right.
But then I really realized later on why. And it's there's a lot of hush hush again going on, and it's primarily due to that economic reason or just the total experience, and hoping people will not reflect on possibly dangerous, if not deadly, encounters they may have in the parks. And it doesn't necessarily just have to be the national parks, it goes all the way down. You've got the national forests, you've got national historic sites, you've got parks in, say, New England, some of the historical parks, that things happen there and nobody can explain exactly what's happening. Um, this has been going on for centuries. A lot of the ancient Native American legends describe some of these things. So it's a curiosity as to why our parks are located at these particular locations. Is it for the purpose of study instead of recreation, which I rather do believe it is? Because if you look at a lot of the missing 411, which David Politis started up. In fact, I was
Right.
one of the original rangers he spoke to, and we were and I mean that was quite a few years ago. But the thing was, we were very sheepish about coming out and saying anything because we were told not to. And of course, you don't want to lose your job. You love your job and so on. But
Right.
again, you get to a point in your life where you say, what's more important, uh, the integrity of the park or the safety of the people? And for me, it was the safety of the people. And I know Washington is not happy with me, but again, I'm getting on in years. Just I don't know how much time I have left, but in that time, I'm definitely going to let people know, when you go to the parks, use precaution and
Right.
be aware of everything that's going on. It doesn't happen at night. I mean, well, it does, but it happens at all times of the day. And it can happen in just a matter of a few feet of you. So nothing really is there to protect you. So you've got to be extremely cautious.
It was interesting. I had a guest on the show, I don't know, probably 5, 6 years ago. And we were talking about Lake Shasta
Oh,
because
yeah.
that was my favorite place to go. First of all, the UFO sky watching was amazing up there, and the amount of things you would
Hmm.
see was crazy. But I used to go camping up there all the time. And from a teenager till an adult, I had 2 or 3 encounters with what I was pretty much was positive was a Bigfoot,
Hmm.
but I what couldn't get close enough to be able to know for sure, like, I was such in investigator mode that it's like, okay, if I can't say for 100% positiveness, I got to keep going back until I get the answer.
Sure.
So I was talking with one of the guests, and I said, yeah, Lake Shasta is my favorite place to go. And the first thing he said is like, oh, I wouldn't go there. I would not go there. And I say, well, why? And he tells me about this whole scenario where he had went out basically on his own. He went to go camping and look for Bigfoot out in the middle of the forest, and had went missing. And like 5 days later, wandered out of the park, and he had no recollection of what happened.
Right.
But they found him, they were like, we've been looking for you. Where you been? He had no idea. And he ended up going and getting regression hypnotherapy done and finding out that he had been actually taken.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that kind of changed for me. It seems like most of the people and the research I've done, most people that go missing in these parks and forests do not return to tell a tale.
No, they don't. They don't.
So it's kind of interesting, and always makes me wonder, when people are being taken, does our government have more to do with it than aliens or Bigfoot or whatever else it is? Because when this person was abducted, they brought him right back out and he left. He didn't have any recollection of what happened to him. So it wasn't going to make any difference. But all these other people, they go and they never come back. So it's always fascinated me.
I personally think that there is a duality taking place between the governments of the world and those extraterrestrials that are visiting. Primarily, you look at the last 50 years, our technology, how it has just exploded compared to all the technology of the previous centuries. And I think that there has been some form of an agreement made.
I do too.
My personal, like I said, why would the military be there and to literally threaten us with life and limb in order to vacate, unless something very top secret was going on? You see that a lot. You see a lot of I hate to say the men in black and so forth, but it's very obvious that when something happens, people seem to be almost immediately notified that you didn't see anything, you didn't hear anything, and you know nothing, by threat. And some people say they may be extraterrestrials in the guise of humans, or that they are humans. I don't know.
Could be both.
It very well could be, and they very well could be in league. But the truth is not wanting to be known.
Right.
I had a case that was very similar to what you were saying, and that happened up here in Colorado, where a family came in the winter to go camping in the park. And this one evening, they came out. They had a campfire going, and they were about the only people in the campground. Colorado in the wintertime can be pretty harsh. So they were there, and they started noticing these lights bobbing up and down on the horizon. And they would get a little closer, and then they would back off. And they were pretty mesmerized by it, but really weren't too concerned. So they decided after a while, well, it's time to go to bed. So they all went into the RV that they were in. They all went to bed, with the exception of the son. The son was about 14, 15 years old. He was still very curious. And so he went out, unbeknownst to the family. And the next morning, they got up in order to cook breakfast outside, and they couldn't find the son. So they contacted the ranger station, and we came out, and we started examining the area and looking. And with a fresh snowfall, it helped because you had fresh footprints. Now, a lot of people don't know this, but when they are walking in snow, or even walking in general, you have a tendency of walking and putting your foot down heel to toe. heel to toe. And so you watch that indentation, and the heel area is always going to be deeper than the toe part. And so we saw these footprints, and they went out into an open field area, and they just stopped, just dead. So the one thing then you start to think, well, is somebody playing a prank here? Did they back up into their own footprints and back out? Well, in order to that happen, then the footprint would be even, because when you step back, it's toe to heel, toe to heel. So your footprint's going to be straight even. This was not the case. And we searched and searched. We searched for 72 hours, could not find the kid. The family finally went home, and we told them that if we found anything, we would notify. And that's a very heart-wrenching thing to have to do. Because hope starts to wane about that amount of time. But we continued. And then by about just almost to a week to the day, we got notification that the boy had been found, but he was 75 miles away in a small town away from the park. So we got in there. We had the local authorities meet with us, and the boy he says, well, I remember going out and looking at the lights, and then I just found myself, here. And I says, you don't remember anything? Do you know how long you have been gone? He says, what, a couple hours? I says, no, almost a week. And you could tell he was just completely shocked by that.
Right.
He could not remember anything about what had happened to him up until that point. And they did try regression and just hit a brick wall. He could not remember any of that. So what is that?
Right.
If that isn't,
and that's how my guest was too.
Yeah. If that wasn't an abduction, what would it have been? Was it
right.
the government? Was it extraterrestrials? We don't know. But the thing is, he had to have been lifted from the part where he was located.
Right. So
Because
there was no other tracks.
Exactly. So, I mean, that is just one of many things that have occurred.
Yeah, Lorraine says the memory was erased, and and that's the way it seemed as well. Like I said, my previous guest wouldn't have even known that he was actually abducted if he wouldn't have went through the regression hypnotherapy, which opened up whatever block that was there, so that was very interesting. We have one of our people in our chat, Michael. He's actually going to be on the show here in a few weeks. He's saying, hi, Chris. Have you ever encountered the shadow people in the forest?
Michael, you name it, I've encountered it, believe me. Shadow people are very common in the forest. You get that feeling, that unnerved feeling. I've been in cases where I've had to go into the backcountry, either on horseback or on quad runners. And you get to a certain point and you get that feeling of being watched. Now you can look around and you can pretty much see everywhere, but not see. It's like the old adage, you can't see the forest for the trees. And that's pretty close. Now on this particular case, this was during midday when I saw my first shadow person. And I was sitting in an open field, and it was tree lined, and I was looking into the trees, and something just didn't feel right. You just didn't want to go into that area. And the horse was bucking. It did not want to go any farther either. So it sensed something. And as I was looking, I took notice right away because I saw movement, and I saw this tree, but what I saw was this hand reach around the bark, black as coal, and then a head peer out and look at me. And of course, I expressed a few choice words, shall we say. And I just stood there mesmerized more than anything else. But I got this constant feeling of unnervedness, uneasiness, like I should be leaving. I should get out of there. But being a park ranger, you kind of have to stand your ground on a lot of
Right.
things. And so I went very, very slowly towards where the tree was. And I got to the tree and I did not blink. I was not going to blink. And I got to the tree and I looked around and there was a rabbit. Now, this is the weird part about it. There was a rabbit sitting there, eyes as black as coal. And it didn't take off. It sat there staring at me. And I got
So
closer.
nothing like a normal rabbit would do. They would be scared and try to scamper off real quick.
Tried to bolt, and it just sat there like it was examining me. And I still continued having this very odd sensation. It finally got up, and it did not jump off like it was taking off to go somewhere. It slowly went around the tree again. And so I followed it, and I could not find that rabbit.
Wow. Michael says we have a lot of those the shadow people in the UK. Stanley is saying you think it's a shapeshifter.
I think they're possibly related. I've seen a lot of animals, and I know biology extremely well, again, being a ranger, but there have been encounters with animals that I have made that did not act like your typical animal. You could almost sense an intelligence behind them, or as if something were controlling them. And I would encounter that quite a few times. I encountered, and they were always alone. I encountered an elk, and it came again. They're never in a hurry. I never see them run. I just see them walk. And one came out on a trail, and again did very much the same thing as the rabbit. It stopped, it stared, and it just stared me down. And it was not going to let me pass. It wasn't acting or running or anything else. It just stood there and stared me down. And birds that would act very odd. So my thinking is something maybe morphing into these creatures, or the animals are under control of something that we don't understand. I mean, one of the biggest, scariest things that I ever encountered was when I was, again, out by myself with a horse, because you have to go look for lost people that go off the trails and so on, make sure they're okay, or if they haven't reported to a certain location by a certain time. This particular time I was on horseback and we were going. The horse started acting strange, and I kind of petted it and got off of it and tried to calm it down. And then all of a sudden I heard this at different rates of speed, and I was going, what is that? That's something I've never heard. What the heck is this? And as I was kind of looking around, I caught a glimmer up in one of the trees. And I looked up and I saw this shimmering shape up on one of the branches, holding onto the branch and kind of stooped on the branch itself. It was a good sized branch. And here was this thing that looked like it was wrapped in cellophane. Now, the closest thing that I can even describe it to is the Predator.
I was just going to say, yeah, that's what with you explaining, that's what I'm envisioning.
Exactly. And it started moving around on the branch, making these noises. Well, I'd had about enough. I thought, okay, I don't know what this is. I have no clue, but I don't like it. And so I got the horse and I slowly was walking backwards with my, watching it, backing out with my back towards the way out. and it just kind of moved along that branch, almost like a monkey would. But it kept watching me. And I finally got out of there, and again, I made a report. Never heard
Nothing ever
anything
came.
about it. But the thing is, there are more and more reports coming out now of these alleged sightings of this thing, and they're all over, even in cities. So my question is, was art imitating true life, or is true life imitating art? Because this, like,
Interesting.
I would have sworn up and down, that it was a predator. And you really have to shake your head. What the heck is going on here?
Absolutely. That's kind of crazy. So, George, he says, I had to step away for a minute due to work, but my question is, why do you think all of a sudden we are seeing more UFOs in the sky? I do believe the government is not going to be able to hide it much longer. That's in my opinion. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, ever since the inception of the cell phone with cameras, we have a tendency of having cameras ready. But I also think it's a desensitization aspect on whose side I'm not sure. Um, I think realistically they're letting themselves be known, because if you think about it, you come from however billion miles or other dimension, they're going to want to try and hide unless there's a reason why not to. And I think that as we progress, our own earthly activities, which are not for the best, are starting to worry them. Maybe not so much about the human race, but what it will do to the rest of the universe should we decide to blow ourselves up. Uh, Everything is interconnected. And I feel that they are monitoring the children with the matches. And hopefully, which is my own personal hope, is that they're here to be benevolent and put us on the right course, the right track. But in our infantile minds, we've been made to be so afraid of them that we would probably shoot first, ask questions later. And I'm sure that's happened already.
Right.
But, I think that they are really just making sure that when the time comes, that they will be able to do something about it. I mean, look at history back in the 60s when the missile silos in the US and Russia
Right.
shut down automatically and they couldn't
Yep.
do anything about it.
Yeah.
So they definitely have the ability. They're always seen around military bases, just like the
Yep.
Redisham incident and so forth. So how far does that go? And in that regard, I don't think the government is involved. I don't think they want them fooling around with their toys, so to speak. And but I'm very much of the belief that they are just slowly getting us used to the idea that they're there. And now with Congress coming out and literally saying that they're there, and you really don't see that much of an outcry.
Right.
It's like that should have made worldwide news. And
But remember, they were always saying before that even, it wasn't true. There was no such thing. But even if there was the premise that it could be true,
yeah,
that it would not be something that they would want to admit to because society would not be able to handle it.
exactly.
Well, unfortunately, over all the years and everything that comes out, many people, they have just figured out that, look, they're not going to tell us the truth. Like we've
Yeah.
saw it personally myself. So, screw what you're saying. This is what we believe. And then, so it's like when they finally come up with all these disclosures, it's everybody's like, see, we told you. It wasn't anywhere what they expected.
Right.
I have a little bit of a different opinion only because I think that it's a combination of a lot of things. Like I think just like with any species or any race, there are good and bad. So I think there are definitely good aliens, and from interviews and experiences I have, there's some very nefarious species out there that do not have the best, interest for us.
Oh, absolutely.
I do think that some of those races do work with the government, and that might be where a lot of like the abduction implants, different things are going on. But I also believe that there is a mixture. I think a lot of what we were seeing, um, probably the last couple of years, were our own governments,
Mhm.
reverse engineered craft,
Yeah.
because it seems to be very planned out. All of a sudden we have this huge increase, and then all of a sudden we get these unidentified objects we have to shoot out of this airspace, and we never hear what they really are. And then
Exactly.
all of a sudden, then the whistleblowers come out, and then, oh, okay, now we're going to admit that, yes, there are some things, and we're going to, after we said forever that the Tic Tac video wasn't true, now, okay, oh, maybe it was true. Um, so I think that there's a lot playing into it, but I do think that there are very good races that are
Mhm.
here because, again, war is nothing new to us. And we have had the capability to blow this world up if we really wanted to multiple times.
Right.
And something has always happened to intervene to keep it from happening.
Mhm.
And from my understanding is that there's a lot of precious material on Earth that they want. So they don't want
Yeah.
us stupid humans going and blowing up the gold mine or whatever it is that they're looking for. So, and I also think that, unfortunately, my precog dreams, and everybody knows they're very accurate, but they have been very weird lately. I've been giving some of them out on the shows and my other show, and things are happening very quickly. And
Mhm.
for years, I've always said, oh, there's not going to be any, fake invasion. Like they might try to do some Project Bluebeam or something, but I don't think it's going. This is changing now, and they're definitely showing me something. I also feel like there's a lot of weather manipulation going on right now, a lot of affecting with the energy field, which for people like me and you, or people who are, very empathic, it is short wiring us.
Yes,
We
it is.
can't focus, I can't meditate. There's so many things, going on. So something is coming. I've been told that these next 6 months, yeah, are going to be bad. We thought that the summer was crazy. Wait till the winter hits.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting. Let's go back to chat. Michael, going back to your story about the predator type thing up in the tree. He says the military has technology that allows them to fold light around the body to cause this effect. Often they use it on reconnaissance missions. And I've actually heard that too from some ex-military, now whistleblowers. I've actually heard that too.
It is a possibility. However, this was
So you sense something different,
20
right?
some
I mean,
years. You could sense
yeah,
it
that's the
more than
difference.
anything else.
Right.
Um, I've seen some of the demonstrations on these military applications, and they usually emit an ozone smell
Okay.
by the way they generate their power to deflect light and so forth. This was not the case, and this if this was a suit, this person had to have been very limber to be able to jump up on a high tree limb, let alone get up there. And it didn't act human. Plus, why would it let itself be known if it was in
Right.
uh, you know a situation where it was trying to conceal itself? It wouldn't have made any noise, but it did, and that clicking noise was what got my attention. Now, I'm not saying it wasn't. They
Right.
always
Right.
say that the military is about 20 years ahead of where we are in technology. So it's a possibility, but I just don't feel it was. Plus, all of these other activities that have been taking place at other parks and locations throughout the world. And they always seem to be just one, not like a few or a column of military personnel. So it leads to make you ponder what it may be.
Well, and I think that you sensing something is very telling. So again, people who that we go off of energy, like when it's strange, we know it,
Yes.
and even more so is that animals are very in tune. So it's
Yes.
very interesting that the fact that you say that the horse as well was very skittish all of a sudden when you get to that area. Like these
Right.
are all things that I pay close attention to that most people wouldn't, because again, when you read energy, you trust that. And
Exactly.
it's a different type of energy than it is from a human's energy. So
Hmm.
that's why I was very interested in that. Okay, let's see. Yeah, and he was saying he was just mentioning that there was that kind of technology, and yeah, it's very true. He does have another question. He says, "How many mutilations have you ever encountered, and were there any alphabet agencies involved?"
Yes,
He's got
unfortunately.
great ones tonight, I'm telling you.
Yeah. The sad thing is, I know all about them, and it's
Okay.
because it's so common in many ways. And I hate to say that way, but it is true. Yes, cattle mutilations. Here in Colorado, it seems to be a hotbed, and it does happen very, very common with a lot of the ranches, the local ranches. You don't get a lot of reports about it because a lot of times the ranchers don't want them known. But out in the parks themselves, for instance, you'll find uh, elk mutilations or other moose, the larger uh, quadrupeds, and
And is it
even
similar? Is it similar? The mutilation similar as that we see like on cattle and sheep on the ranches?
yeah. Now the one thing that is very, very, very rarely known is that there are also human mutilations,
Oh,
very similar in in guys as organs
wow.
are removed, uh, certain parts of the body, the eyes, the certain skin parts, limbs that are there. Now the thing is about these mutilations is when something dies, especially outside, it's going to draw almost immediately insects. You get flies who lay eggs and so on, and they start to take over the remains. They start to break it down. They feed upon it, and then you also have other predators that come in to take what they can get and rip the carcass apart. In all
Right.
of these cases, that's never the case. You never see any fly larvae. You never experience any um, mutilation of the body being torn by a predator. They're always intact.
Wow.
And the decay rate is extremely slow, unlike a natural predator attack. And in
Wow.
each case, the incisions, when a predator makes an incision, it's going to leave a jagged tear uh, remnant on the carcass because they're biting down and then they're pulling. In all of these, it's like a fine laser cut. It's it coagulates the blood at the point of where it's cut, so you never see any blood residue. And
Wow.
you very, very, if ever, see any blood around the area of the attack. So are they lifting these animals up to something, a ship or some kind, and then just letting them go, or is there something else taking place?
Right. Oh
Um,
my gosh. Chris, this is so. I didn't even expect it to go this route, right? I mean, I was expecting all the other questions and things. I wasn't expecting this route, and this is kind of blowing my mind. We only have like 5 minutes left of the
oh
show.
goodness,
So and this seems to be happening quite often now when I bring
yes,
somebody on. The guests are so amazing. The information is so much that I have to bring you back for a part two because I
absolutely.
know this is going to trigger a whole lot of questions for everybody. So I would love to have you back on so that we can get
Hmm.
more in depth in all this. But
Sure.
before we leave, I do, and I'm just going to have you just give me a one answer for this, and then we will also go into that more deeply on the next
Okay.
show.
Mhm.
But what is your opinion on why we have never been able to find a live or a dead Bigfoot?
I've been asked this before. My personal belief is they're interdimensional.
Huh, that's my brother right there.
Yeah.
That's my theory too. That is absolutely my theory.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
With all of the sightings, I've seen him. I've seen him 5 feet away from me. And I was a little kid at the time. And I was sitting by the bank of a little creek, and I heard a snapping noise, and I looked up and I looked up and I looked up and I looked up, and here was this thing looking down at me going, and I just looked at him and I was amazed. I smiled and I said, "Hey, how you doing?"
Right.
And I was never afraid of him, but there have been cases where there have been situations where you probably should be. But oh yeah, I've had interdimensional situations. I believe I've entered an interdimension down at the Everglades National Park, which is a story unto itself. And I mean, UFOs, like again, ghost stories I could tell you about, portals, you name it. I'm kind of a living skinwalker ranch, so to speak.
Well, I think that you should come back here on Top Secret News for a second one. Get more into the mutilations, get more into the Bigfoot, the interdimensional beings, and then I also think I need to bring you on to Paranormal Connections, and we
Sure.
can you know talk about all of that as well as the paranormal stuff that goes on
Mhm.
that you've encountered out there as well.
Yeah,
I just think there's just so much information, and it's always hard to try to fit anything into a 1 hour show, especially when you've
sure.
got great questions and great guests. So I definitely hope that you'd be happy to come back and we can get you back here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, like I says,
Um,
us Georgians need to stick together.
That's right. That's right. And yeah, Michael's saying he could listen to you for hours. And I
Oh,
think
thank
that's,
you.
what a lot of people is. Stanley's saying incredible show. Lorraine, such a great show. Yeah, again, this has been so informative. I knew it would. I mean, when people start, like, again, when people started asking me about this topic and find somebody, you were my go-to person. And
Sure.
it's even better than I was expecting. So
Oh, well,
I
thank you.
really, really appreciate you being on. Why don't you let the listeners know where they can contact you if
Sure.
they need help, where they can contact
Mhm.
your group, and also you guys can go to the event page on my page, and the links and everything are also available there.
Absolutely. Well, our webpage
Thanks,
is
Ellen. Go
our
ahead.
our webpage is anubisparanormal.wix .com /APRO. We've got basically everything that we do. You can reach us at Anubis Paranormal Research org at Gmail. We are also on Facebook. We have our main APRO page, but we also have all of our chapters that are around the world that you can go directly to and learn more about what's happening um, in their general areas. So we have not only the United States, but we have Japan, Scotland, England, and Canada, and we continue to grow. So if anybody wants to start up a chapter, we investigate not only haunted activity, but UFOs, alien abductions, and cryptids.
I'm telling you, I always say you're my brother from another mother, but maybe we were actually from the same mother because we
I'm
even do the
wondering.
same thing, Chris.
Yes, I agree. I mean, that's why we're so close.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, again, thank you so very much for coming on the show and doing
You're
this for
welcome.
me. I appreciate it. I'll get a hold of you after the show. We'll book another
Okay.
show on here for part two, another one for Paranormal Connections, and I
Okay.
will talk to you soon. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome, Christina. Talk to you later.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much again for joining me tonight. Another great show. Please make sure that you share the show with all of your friends, all of your groups, get the information out. I love you guys, and I'm going to be back next week. And we have literally 2 months already of shows booked out with some incredible not only guests, whistleblowers. We're going to be talking about targeted individual, my lab, abductees. You name it, we're talking about it. So nothing is off topic. If you have something you want us to have a guest about or talk about, send it to me. All right, with that being said, I will see you next Thursday at 4 o'clock PST. See you then. Love you.
The truth is here and now on WLTKDB Talk Radio at WLTKDB.com.